Welcome to Milestone Mindset Live. We're here today to talk about employer branding and your bottom line. I'm Nancy Sargent, the CEO of Sargent Marketing and the founder of the Milestone Marketing Blueprint and your host. I'm here with Brian Wallace, and he is the HR consultant to many brands to help them define and implement their employee branding and culture so that they can have the best top talent so everyone can thrive, employees and the company with their bottom line. Welcome, Brian. How are you today?
I'm doing great. Thank you, Nancy. How are you?
I'm well. I should say that I'm live from New Jersey and Brian's live from Texas, right?
Yes, ma'am. Houston, Texas.
Houston, Texas. I have family there. And
Fantastic.
yeah. So Brian and I met at a conference. Actually, maybe I'll do a little show and tell. We went to a conference called Take the Stage, or close to the name. And let's see here. We got these wonderful sweatshirts, which I normally keep on the back of my chair. So we both went there to brush up our skills, to share our commitment, our experience, our wisdom, and our mentoring and guidance with others. And this show, Milestone Mindset Live, I've been doing since about summer 2021. And it is where I have guests who have had milestones in their lives, either their personal lives, their professional lives, and really everyone has, and to share information that will be useful to our guests, which are generally speaking, small to mid-sized business leaders, entrepreneurs and solopreneurs and nonprofits. But even if you are an employee to be working for a company, getting a new job, what we're going to discuss today is going to be very helpful. This show, your employer brand and your bottom line, is going to have very, very tactical information. So please do pay attention and enjoy it. And the replays will be on whatever social media you're watching this on now, and it'll also be a column on Medium. So with that intent, we're really here to share. So Brian, I would like you to set the stage of exactly what it is that what is exactly the employer brand or the employer recruitment brand and the bottom line. What is it and why are they hand in hand?
Okay. Well, first of all, Nancy, thanks so much for having me on the show. I really appreciate it. And it's great to collaborate with you on things like this. I love the fact that we're talking about a topic today that really ties into both human resources and marketing. Marketing, of course, being your specialty. And the employment brand is really very similar to a commercial or consumer brand. That's probably the easiest way to describe it. An employer brand, it's all about creating a perception in the minds of either future candidates or current employees as far as who you are as an organization and why it may be a great idea for that applicant or that employee to be working for you. So to kind of draw some of the parallels, if you were, if you're working on a commercial brand, you're looking to create a perception in the minds of your consumer or your customer that you are an attractive company to do business with, right? You're working to create a competitive advantage. You're working to build a great reputation in the industry. You're working to drive productivity and create raving fans that are going to help share your message with others and really drive the success of the business. An employer brand is similar in that you're working hard to actually drive the message and the perceptions of people who are going to be connected with who you are as an organization from the standpoint of being an employer. Okay, so ideally you want to create, you want to form a message that's going to resonate in the minds of your ideal employees that you are going to be an ideal company to work for and that you have a lot to offer. You have a great, what they call an employer value proposition, which is, what they receive in exchange for their work. And the more that you can clearly articulate that brand, the stronger your capability is going to be in attracting the talent that you really want and need in order to be able to grow your business. So it's all about making sure that you're attracting and hiring the talent that you're going to need to help you grow long term.
Let's talk about the practical journey of that, right? We talk about the consumer brand and the employer brand. I would say, generally speaking, the consumer brand might be something that the candidate more readily has access to or knows, depending on the size of the company.
Okay.
And if it's not a big company, big brand name, that's what websites are for. That's what social media is for. When we wonder, just a side note here, when we wonder what needs to go on social media, a lot of social media is for social proof when it's a brand page. You're not going to, generally speaking, for a small to mid-sized company, find thousands and thousands and thousands of followers on any social page. You're not looking for that. You're looking for what they represent. So the consumer brand, companies of all sizes spend lots and lots of time figuring out that voice, that tone. What is the emotional connection, and what is the problem problem we're solving or opportunity we're giving to the person who's either going to consume our services, buy our product, or otherwise.
Right.
When the employee to be considers joining, or a current employee considers staying, because it costs more to get a new employee than to retain and grow the staff internally. If you hire the right originally, they need to marry. They need to be fluid. You can't have a consumer brand that says something completely different from the recruitment brand. And I know that sounds obvious maybe, but it is worth saying. And so what that really means is when HR comes into the fold with marketing, that's when it's golden. They shouldn't operate under two silos. Actually, I don't think they should operate under separate silos no matter what. So I'm already thinking, Brian, of our second conversation I want to have, but today we'll make sure that all the concepts that we're talking about are clearly defined.
Okay.
So
that's great.
Stick with that. One of the things we talked about, and I'll just put a slide up, what we're talking about today in HR recruitment marketing is really HR beyond compliance and administration, rules, regulations, policies, and procedures. I think when I started working, HR was really that 99% of the time. Yes, they had some events and blood drives and they helped you with their benefits and everything, but the whole HR mission has evolved into a much more integrated and tangible function. Do you want to comment on that for a moment?
Sure. Yeah, it absolutely has. Especially in recent years after the onset of COVID, there's been a renewed focus on making sure that your HR practices are set up properly and that they're driving the success of the organization. And, HR in general, my peers out there have been really working extremely hard to make sure that companies are continuing to thrive, that employees are taken care of, and that they're positioned to succeed. So, in the long past, it used to be that HR was all about compliance and administration. And then eventually you got into, and that's oftentimes how small companies start. Okay. It's from an HR standpoint, you've got one administrative employee who basically takes on responsibility for, payroll, or they may do some recruiting, or they might do, light administrative work. And then somebody comes along and says, okay, we also want you to take care of making sure that things are kept compliant. And, oh, by the way, you're going to be tasked with organizing the company's Christmas party, all of that kind of thing. And so that person, over time, becomes the quasi HR person. Now, adding to that, now you need to begin including some of the operational elements. So you need to be thinking about recruiting. You need to be thinking about performance management, employee relations, compensation, and benefits. And those become a little bit more complex. They're critical for the long-term success of the organization. But especially over the last 3 years or so, we've seen the idea that HR has to be solidly focused on driving the overall alignment and accountability and engagement within the organization and really positioning the business to thrive. And so, yes, HR has definitely evolved over time. It's all about adding power to the business is what it boils down to, because your business is made up of your employees. And if they're positioned properly and they're focused and aligned and accountable, it's amazing what you can do as an organization.
So I actually wanted to come back to our title as your employer brand and your bottom line.
Yep.
So as you're saying, we're talking about an organization culture and brand. And brand is, let's further today's conversation, call it your ability to connect with the person that's either going to buy or work for you or support you or anything. That's what your brand, it's your name, it's your essence, it's who you are.
That's
so
correct.
let's just talk about what it really means. Why are talented employees who feel appreciated and aligned with the company's brand and then their mission, vision, all that, why and how does that really matter to the bottom line?
Well, when an employee is able to connect with the overall brand of the organization, oftentimes they find that there's a sense of purpose in what they're doing. Okay. And the vast majority of people that are out there working today want to have a sense of purpose. They want to understand that what they're spending their time doing and the investment that they're making makes a difference. And so if they're able to really connect with the overall organizational brand, they can see that there's value in the work that they're performing, then that connects at a deeper level than just simply saying, well, I have a task to do and I get paid to do it, so I guess that's what I'm going to do today. So organizations are the really powerful businesses. The ones that really succeed long-term are those that really help employees to understand who they are as an organization at a core level, why the work that they're doing makes a difference in the world, and what that employee's unique role is in helping to drive the success of the business itself. So the more that they can really resonate and become deeply associated with that brand and the mission of the organization, the higher the level of commitment and loyalty and engagement and dedication that employee is going to have toward making the business successful.
Brian, how does that apply to every level of employee in the organization? An often described example is in a hospital when a cleaning person is cleaning, how important that is. And that's an easy visual to understand.
Yeah.
And, that's called environmental services. And there's a reason for that. Every organization needs every level. It needs it for the opportunity of growth, and it needs to sustain. So how and why does it matter to apply what we're talking about to every level employee?
Really, you're talking about creating alignment within the organization and engagement. And whether you're talking about somebody let's use the hospital example, for the sake of discussion, you have an executive team, and of course they're going to be connected with the overall brand, or at least they should be, especially at that level. You have nurses who hopefully they're going to understand the purpose and the nature of what they're trying to accomplish as an organization. As you get further down into the business, it becomes easier for people to be seen as just kind of transactional, if you will, or kind of a cog in the wheel, to use an example. But that's where the engagement really happens, and the connection with the customers really happens. And so, if I'm an executive in a hospital and I have, let's say, a team of people in the environmental services group, I'm going to make darn sure that I am connecting with those individuals and helping them understand how their role contributes to the overall success of the business. Because if environmental services is not doing their job well, number one, you're going to have major complaints as far as JACO and the accreditation organizations. You're also going to have patient service and patient satisfaction problems because, I mean, let's face it, who wants to stay in a dirty hospital room? Okay. But you're also, if you don't have that group really aligned with your overall purpose and mission, you're going to miss an opportunity, because those are the very people who can make the stay special for the patients, just by a kind word in passing, or helping people understand the overall, I don't know, the value of staying at that particular hospital and getting the care that they receive. It's people at the lower level. And if they're connected well with the purpose of the organization, it's amazing the amount of impact that they can have on the overall customer experience.
Why don't we take another example? I think this is the real tactical, practical part. A small business.
Sure.
Now, a small business could be a solopreneur. A small business could have half a dozen employees. Yeah. A small business could have up to 50 employees. So that's still a range, but let's look at that sweet spot today. That's a sweet spot that I have, and I think we share. Mm-hmm. How do they practically roll this out once they've got it? They've worked with you, they've worked with me, their brand is spot on, everybody knows everything. And the small business owner, leader, managers, the time, there's just not enough of it for anything. So how does a small organization on a limited budget, crunched for time, everyone's doing, there's no, like in a hospital, you can tell what everyone's doing by the color of their shirt, it's not what it looks like in a small business. So how does a small business person make this stick?
Well, okay. It starts even during really even before the onboarding process. It starts with the first interface that an applicant has with the organization. So making sure that your brand is clear within your website and within your recruiting processes. Making sure that there are key and core messages that are delivered repeatedly and consistently and clearly throughout that process, because you're beginning to drive the overall messaging for the organization. Once an applicant actually comes into the organization, it's critically important to really hone your message and deliver it very, very clearly during the onboarding process, because that's the best opportunity that you ever have to influence the perceptions of that individual. So taking your time and making sure that they can understand who you are as an organization, how you want to operate, what your organizational values are, and how they actually translate into real world day by day interactions. Those are some of the initial steps that you take. And then it's a matter of taking that same type of information and incorporating it into your performance management processes or your recognition programs. If you have a brand, let's say, that is highly focused on statements about the fact that you're an innovative company. Okay, you want your reward systems or your compensation systems or recognition platforms to be reinforcing that innovation brand. Okay, so that you're keeping your employees focused on what you say you're about. Okay, so as that's going to be pretty standard across the board, regardless of whether we're talking about a company that has 5 employees or a company that has 1,000. Now, when it gets down to small businesses in particular, they obviously have to be a little more judicious with their time and their effort. And, that's, thankfully one of the values that you and I can bring to the table is that we're able to kind of come in and augment or support that work and help them to be able to accomplish these things. But it's, there are certain steps that you can take that are going to help move you in that general direction. It's just a matter of how quickly you want to get there. But it's critically important, especially, even with as few as 5 employees, to start thinking about your employment brand and how you want to be represented as an employer.
And I find that the businesses who ask the question, what is my employer brand, or what do people think it is, does it align? I think I know what it is. Let's say, do the people that are going to engage with me know? And then for some of the small businesses, it really starts with the leaders understanding it and making little shifts in their mindset, shifts in their way they communicate, and so on and so forth. So for baby steps, my whole premise for my division of milestone marketing and milestones, inch stones, baby steps, these things are not magic wand waves that transform overnight. We're not even talking about brands that need to do some repair to their recruitment brand. We're just talking in general. So for the folks that are generally our audience here, we want you to know, even in the marketing of either side, consumer and recruitment, and we do both, which is why when I met Brian, we knew immediately we were going to do at least one of these shows, because we're just two sides, or really on the same coin. As a matter of fact, Brian's doing some great blogging on his site, and I'm creating the Medium column, Milestone Mindset magazine, through these shows. And Brian shared an article. I'm not quite sure where you're going to publish this, but I'm going to put this up here for you to give some real tips for anyone watching today to consider questions to help you, business owner, nonprofit, entrepreneur, any size business owner, how to define your employment brand.
Well, now you're going to test my memory, Nancy.
Well, I noticed I didn't
have the information up.
Okay, hold on though. I did not put the number there, so you are not bound.
Okay. All right. Yeah, there are a number of things that that companies can do to really begin to kind of hone their employment brand. Number one, unfortunately, there are a lot of small businesses that realistically, they don't think about it, and they need to, because the companies that are really able to gain a lot of power and momentum and thrive long-term are the ones that can sit back and think, who do we really want to have as part of this organization? And how are we going to reach out and grab them by the shoulders and say, you need to work here? Okay. And that's what this branding it's all about. And it's about continuing to engage your employees in that process. So, when it comes to actually creating the employment brand, it's a matter of thinking, what are the core characteristics that we want to convey to applicants or potential employees about who we are and why they should come to work here? It's about making sure that you're very, very clear on your values as an organization and what people can expect when they come to work there. It's about talking with your employees and figuring out, what do they enjoy? What do they not enjoy about the experience of being an employer or employee? Let's see, it's about making sure that your messaging is crystal clear across the different platforms that you're using, whether it's social media or your web page or even your print. And it's figuring out, how do we take that and weave it into our recruiting process, and how do we continue to drive those brand messages through all of the different elements of the employee experience, and the things that employees encounter day by day. If we say that we're a company that focuses very heavily on recognizing employee contributions, well, then when employees are making those contributions, you have to be sure that you're reinforcing that activity and that you're continuing to support that brand. But getting back to my original point, a lot of times people just don't think about this. They're stuck in the historical view that says, hey, you're lucky to have a job here and you're lucky to receive a paycheck. And we just can't operate that way anymore. The market's too tight. And we've got an unemployment rate that's basically a little over 3.5%, if I remember correctly. That's tight. And most of the time, high quality employees who want to be working are working. So you have to be very, very effective in creating that messaging and then driving it repeatedly and effectively. And, that can be tough for small businesses, but it's something that if you put a little bit of effort into it, it's very, very possible, especially if you get some help.
And to reinforce, when you approach that side of the branding, and when I'm saying consumer branding, I mean end user branding. A consumer could be a business to business contact as well.
Sure.
Please don't start creating a whole new brand without being very attuned to what the current marketing brand is. There should be written guidelines and so on and so forth.
Correct.
And the marketing team, internal and external, will benefit when HR comes into the fold, and likewise the other way around. So I'm just going to repeat that they are not silos here. I actually wish in this interview I had us actually, just for a moment, I'm going to do this, which it should be that close. There should actually be no divider when HR and marketing teams are working together for the overall bottom line of the organization.
Yeah, agreed. If HR is doing their job right, then they're finding the right type of employees who are going to support the organizational brand. And in the same breath, if marketing is doing their job right, then they're basically setting up the commercial brand, and they're driving the message where if an employee says, hey, I'm thinking about coming to work for XYZ company, and marketing has already done the work in driving that brand, then that gives something that the employee can resonate with and that is attractive to them. There are many large companies out there. Of course, the stereotypical one is Google, where people just automatically, understand kind of what their brand is all about. And at least up until recently, their employer brand was very clear too. So, the two have to work hand in hand if they're going to be able to do this effectively.
And that's not out of reach for the audiences we're addressing. And often, just to say also, HR, we're talking about HR being part of this, driving the strategy. Mm-hmm. The marketing team is here to do the branding and lifting and the collaterals and the social and all that, generally speaking. But the more we get the authentic voice through real people's experience. So we're talking about small businesses, entrepreneurs, nonprofits, et cetera. But really, we're talking about people relationships, not even people management. So for someone who's looking for a job today, who might be curious to hear about what brands are looking for, companies, they know pretty much that they want to work for someone who aligns with what they do. And someone might say, you know what, I just need a job. I'll do anything. Well, it's really not true if you think about it. There are certain things as an individual you'll do and you won't do. So whether or not you've thought about this, it's that side as well. And anyone today who's hiring someone can be looking for a job the next day, and then someone's hiring them. So how does a candidate bring this concept of aligning with the employer brand to an interview conversation?
Well, the number one recommendation that I would have for anybody who's looking to interview here in the near future is be prepared. Do your homework ahead of time. Make sure that you understand who the organization is, how it functions, what its core messaging is, and what its values are. Because if I'm interviewing somebody and I can tell that they've done their homework and they're able to articulate how their characteristics or values align directly with the organization, then that's going to be obviously a check that I can put in that particular box, because I know that they're taking the interview seriously, that they believe that they have something that is valuable that they're bringing to the table, and that they have a desire. Speaking of values specifically, people are oftentimes hired for technical skill. They're fired for values alignment issues. Okay, so really understanding what those values are and really taking the time to think about how well you align with those values is critically important. So just my recommendation is to be sure that you're doing your homework, you understand what the values are and how you can align with them, and really help them drive the overall success of the organization.
That's the key. Just like an organization is showing their end users how they can help them, as an employee, we're showing the organization how they can help them achieve that. So, Brian, I think it would be really interesting to have another segment with you where both of us talk about real examples that our clients do on all sides of this to reflect that employer value proposition and blend the employer brand and the consumer brand. And because both of us really are here to help companies thrive, and our perspective of coming to them, both of us being on the consulting side for so long and also having been internally employed as well, we've just worked with so many companies that we can bring this ability to have a step outside the organization, see things from a fresher perspective, and we're trained to help the organization's internal teams come up with their own solutions, and we help them either implement it themselves or we can do that for them on both sides here. So that's the value of having an external person. Certainly, we're never going to tell someone they understand their branding and their internal culture better than they do, but we're going to help them tease it out and apply it so they can be more successful.
Yeah, and oftentimes it's helping them to really begin to understand how that brand is perceived and how it can be shaped to make sure that they're as effective as possible.
Absolutely. Well, this is a terrific topic because there is no consumer / B2B brand without good employees. And one employee can really cause a huge problem for everyone, including the employee. And it's our responsibility as hiring individuals, hiring organizations, to make sure we hire properly so that doesn't happen, because no one wants to see that to happen to anyone.
And kind of taking the flip side of that, Nancy, it's also very possible that if you're managing your processes properly and you've really nailed down exactly what the brand is and you know what you're looking for, it's very possible for you to hire a person who's going to be a superstar and it's going to help take your organization to an entirely different level. The challenge comes into play where people just aren't taking the time to think these things through. And then they start to wonder, well, how did I end up with with this particular employee and this issue? Where if you just take the time to work through it, it's amazing the results that you can achieve and the team that you can create long term.
Absolutely. Well, Brian, I really enjoyed this conversation.
Me too.
The takeaway I'd like to say to this is the bottom line of this interview, this conversation, is that branding in general impacts the bottom line. And the better that is aligned with the culture, with the values, with the day-to-day processes, everyone will win, everyone will thrive, and everyone will go home happier at the end of the day, which will make family life better and your life better. And really, that is what I know fuels you and I, Brian. We get to help people have better experiences at work so they can have better quality of life as well. That's just a perk that we get.
That is absolutely the target.
So Brian, will you join me again and we'll go over some examples and give some more context to what we were talking about today?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. Love it.
Terrific. Well, if anyone has any questions for either of us, our contact information has been scrolling the whole time, and we'd both love to hear from you. Thank you.
Nancy, thanks so much for having me. I appreciate it.